After World War II, most Europeans were impoverished and the European economy was in shambles. Desperate for change and seeking a stable life, people turned to communism to solve their social and economic problems. By 1945, the line between those who believed in democracy and those who wanted communism was firmly divided by the Iron Curtain. Those in the east of the Black Line was defined by communism, and nations to the west of the Black Line were believers in democracy. This was the start of the Cold War, a period of global tensions between ideologies of the Western nations, including the United States and members of NATO, and the European nations, which consisted of the Soviet Union and members of the Warsaw Pact. This documentary will cover incidents of espionage cases inside America itself, often at the peak of the Cold War.
The Cambridge Five were a few of an increasing number of Western citizens during the Cold War who were quickly abandoning trust in their own governments. Kim Philby, Donald Dort McLean, Guy Burgess, Anthony Blunt, and John Cairncross. Those were the names of British diplomats, spies, and private citizens who dedicated themselves to the communist cause. They were called the Cambridge Five because they had all attended the University of Cambridge in the 1930s. They met each other in the Cambridge Apostles, a secret and elite debate society whose members consisted of mostly liberal Marxists. Five were readily drawn into the group because of their past. For example, Donald McLean was the son of a liberal military policeman and would later be sent to the liberal Dersham School. Anthony Blunt is remembered by historian John Edward Bull as a stuck-up intellectual. The five were recruited by the Soviets during their time in Cambridge College. Guy Burgess would begin to seek a conservative reputation, allying himself with well-known conservative politicians before World War II, such as Captain Jack McNamara and Sir George Joseph Ball, who ran the Conservative Party's central office. In the spring of 1944, Burgess was recruited to the Foreign Office due to his experience as a radio producer and used his position to inform Moscow of British intelligence. Similar to Burgess, Donald McLean appeared to reject communism and was accepted as a diplomat in the fall of 1935. When he was assigned to investigate the role of the old Axis powers in the outcome of the Spanish Civil War, McLean also began sending information to Moscow. McLean did not believe in completely abandoning the United Kingdom, rationalizing his position with something Burgess had said to him earlier. Everyone gives away information. When Churchill was in opposition, he used to give away confidential information about what the government was thinking to Maesky, the Russian ambassador at the time. After the end of World War II, Burgess and McLean provided information on the intent of the Marshall Plan, which they apparently described as a way for the United States to rebuild a capitalist Europe and establish influence. The USSR would later refuse aid and prevent Soviet countries from doing so as well.
Meanwhile, Anthony Blunt had joined the British Army in 1939 and the MI5 in 1940. He would begin to pass decoded Enigma messages during World War II to Moscow. Kim Philby had returned to England with his newly wed communist wife, who might have recruited him. At the start of the Spanish Civil War, he worked for the Times as a journalist on the side of the nationalist Franco, the Spanish military dictator. Acting as a spy for both the Russians and the British, he assisted in attempted assassinations of Franco, while also fighting alongside, being decorated by him, all to get into fascist circles. Later, he would be invited into MI6 and would use his position during World War II to allow the USSR to win decisive victories. Trouble began when Philby learned that the US and British were searching for a mole in the British embassy, and that McLean was suspected. Burgess intentionally got himself recalled for bad behavior, for warn McLean. In the summer of 1951, Burgess and McLean escaped, making international headlines, although their defection was not discovered until 1956. This incident placed Philby under intense suspicion, and he was forced to resign from the MI6. Although he was cleared, employed as a journalist, and later as a spy, his reputation never recovered, and he defected to the Soviet Union in 1951. An interview with an old friend from the MI6 revealed that there was yet another mole. In 1964, Blunt was interrogated and confessed in exchange for immunity. What resulted was years of speculation and depiction in the popular media in the search for the fifth man.
Mr. Harold Philby, on the right, holds a press conference to deny charges that he was involved in the disappearance of Burgess and McLean. The 43-year-old former Foreign Office diplomat has challenged his accuser, an MP, to repeat the charges outside the Commons.
Mr. Philby, Mr. McMillan, the Foreign Secretary, said there was no evidence that you were the so-called third man who allegedly tipped off Burgess and McLean. Are you satisfied with that clearance that he gave you?
Yes, I am.
Well, if there was a third man, were you in fact the third man?
No, I was not.
Do you think there was one?
No comment.
Well, Mr. Philby, the disappearance of Burgess and McLean is almost as much of a mystery today as it was when they went away about 4 years ago or more. Can you shed any light on it at all?
No, I can't. In the first place, I'm debarred by the Official Secrets Act from saying anything that might disclose to unauthorized persons information derived from my position as a former government official. In the second place, the Burgess-McLean affair has raised issues of great delicacy in the sphere of international affairs. I left the service some 4 years ago, and I haven't any means of knowing whether words of mine, perhaps lifted from context, perhaps even garbled, as they sometimes have been, wouldn't severely prejudice or damage the government in its conduct of international affairs.
But the Kamich Five, remembered by Moscow as the Magnificent Five and the ablest group of foreign agents in KGB history by historians Christopher Andrew and Oleg Gordovsky, were no more.